This is Storytellers and Storysellers live on tape. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar on the IVM Podcast Network. We're back in the studio for the first time this year. That feels weird to say. I mean, it's the 19th day of January and we had a bank to tide us over till now. Thanks, Saurabh, for doing that. We did, 37 episodes last year and that's tiding us over. I feel very good saying this. It feels like we run a professional setup. On today's episode, we've got someone very special. I am a big fan of this guy's company. I've been a client and a collaborator at various stages in my career with Ormax Media. Have you ever wondered which is the biggest film of the year? Have you ever wondered which film generated the most buzz? Not just which film. Have you ever wondered what is the most popular song in the country, or who is the most popular star? You go on the internet and Salman fans are fighting Shah Rukh fans and they're fighting Akshay Kumar fans, rightly so. Akshay Kumar, sorry. But what if your company told people definitively the answers to these questions? That's what Ormax does. Please give a storyteller's welcome to Shailesh Kapoor, founder and CEO of Ormax Media. Shailesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vineet. Pleasure to be here.
I've, like I said, been a fan of the company, been a fan of the work that you do. Everything from your research modules to the power rankings to heartbeats. You've got a product for nearly every type of content, media format. I would say Ormax is one of the best kept secrets of the media and entertainment world. And I mean that as a compliment. I'm going to say the real OGs know the power of Ormax. And I really have been evangelizing Ormax to many, many people just because of the sheer power of the insights that Ormax brings, not to the media planning game, but to the content planning game, right? Can you give us a whirlwind tour of Ormax, how you started it and where it is now? And then we'll go into talking about some of the problems and some of the gaps that Ormax is helping creators solve.
Yeah, so we started in 2008. I come from essentially a media background. I've worked in broadcasting, which is largely television, for 9 years. Somewhere when I was getting a little, I would say, bored of that, and I was looking at doing something else, I got in touch with Wispy Doctor, who continues to run Ormax as a research and consulting firm, which is not media specific, but I was one of their clients for a while in various broadcasting capacities. So we thought, there is a need gap of a company specializing in insights in the media industry, because a lot of times general research companies tend to do majority of their work in FMCGs, and therefore the lens tends to be more product centric rather than entertainment or service centric. So that was the idea. I mean, initially it was more television. Slowly it got into theatrical, and of course last 3-4 years the streaming has really taken off. The idea was to find common industry needs. My passion lies in content and in entertainment business, so that part is something that came naturally to me. Find common industry needs and pain points and see if we can have offerings or products, as we call them, to service them. And it's a small industry at the end of the day. There are only 20-30 big players. So once you can understand and build those relationships, it seemed like a very it seemed like a thing to do. And there are companies in Hollywood which have been doing similar stuff, but there was nobody in India really. And I think even now, while there are some outfits, as a single standalone company, there's nobody there. So it's been nice. So we've evolved over the years, I guess, from being a research firm to more like an analytics and consulting firm, with forecasting being one of our main areas of work, whether when we're testing content or tracking campaigns, to be able to predict what a film or a show will do as in terms of box office or viewership. So we have moved away from conventional focus group kind of research to more predictive and business-led work, which is where a lot of those tools that you mentioned come in. So it's evolved, but it's nice, and we've seen the industry also evolve. I mean, when we started, there was no digital in any form virtually. There was only YouTube, which was just coming up, and today it's our main line of business, even higher than TV and theatrical. So it's been a good 14 and a half years and going on.
Love it. I think there's a very important gap that Ormax has continued to fill. I know that when you started out, broadcast was the big thing, and then there have been multiple pivots. You've added modules, you've added solutions that have really helped. Right? Help me understand this in the simplest of terms. Why do producers of content, whether it's in broadcast, whether it's in digital, whether it's now in podcasts as well. I know there's some work that you're doing on the podcast front as well. Why do they come to you? What are sort of, say, the top 3 or 4 problems that they bring to you and say, hey, help us solve this?
I think one of the universal problems is failure rate of content, because even in the best of the times, in the best of the industries in India, whether you look at any category or any language, success rate tends to be lower than 20-25%.
You're being generous.
And that's in the best of the circumstances. And in a bad year, you could be as low as 5%, 6%. So while you could make money through other sources of revenue and rights and stuff like that, in terms of acceptance or likability or audience liking what you're serving to them, it can be very low. So there, and it's entertainment, producing entertainment is not exactly low cost most of the time, at least in films or in OTT now. So the idea is to be able to increase that from, say, 15% to 25%. And it becomes a part of the process to select what kind of content to make or to improve it once you've decided to make it. So people, and the various people have various approaches. So, for example, some people do like our intervention at the script stage to help them select which scripts to make. While the other believe that's something that is more a creative call, and they would rather help use our services at a stage when the content is ready, so that they can decide how to market it and how to, in a way, position it correctly. So because it's a creative business, one has to respect that different creative people will come with different approaches, and it is how one producer like a Dharma may see it versus how Yashraj may see it may be very different. How some international companies may see it versus how some homegrown Indian producers may see it could be very different. But I think eventually the idea is to be able to improve success rate in some form or the other, either via better marketing or via better quality of content. And that generally then cuts across a lot of our work as a dominant theme. Having said that, some people also are using it for strategic work, for example, to decide which categories to get into, for example, which languages to get into, what kind of genres to focus on. Eventually, that is also leading to better success rate. But that kind of work tends to be more in the consulting space, where one is looking at developing business plans or feasibility analysis and that kind of stuff. But that never gets really talked about, because that's not the work which comes in public domain.
Of course,
that's not what we'll put out on social media and stuff.
That's awesome, man. I think I keep saying content is the fastest moving FMCG at this point, right? The way we consume it these days. And I feel like a lot of the work that you're doing tries to bring some of that rigor from FMCG category development, brand development, product development, and then future analysis as well into the content side of things, right? I think these movements are very important to progress the art and science of content more towards the science of things, right? Because I'm sure the art side of things is fairly well understood by those who are practitioners, but they need some kind of cushioning, they need some kind of de-risking, they need some kind of deeper understanding. I'll give you an example. And one of the places where an Ormax research really helped us figure out life was with a show called Ye Meri Family that we'd done at TVF. And one of the things that we really wanted to understand was, how did the show really do? What did people like about it? Now, for a YouTube creator, it's very easy, right? You can read the comments, and then even if you apply a basic categorization of comments and you understand on what scale,
right,
even if it's from a bad to great scale, you can glean some insights, right? But sharp questions like, hey, we made a period piece. Should we make a second season? It's a high effort, high production value, needs story development. Questions like that got answered through an Ormax research, which is invaluable insight for a producer, right? What happens when you try and do this for the current day OTT scenario? And let me qualify this question a little bit, right? We've moved past YouTube being the sort of de facto digital platform of consumption. You've got, what, on last count, 35, 37 OTT players. There's a new one every week.
Yeah, if you count the language ones, they're probably
Yeah.
60 plus. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the future, right? I mean, it sort of mirrors what e-commerce is also seeing. You're seeing people playing in horizontals, people playing in verticals, genre verticals, language verticals. So much is happening.
Right.
Nobody's sharing numbers. Nobody is telling the market how many people saw it. I mean, Netflix will come out and say, oh, 71 million people worldwide sampled this show. What does that really mean, right? Movies, for example, as well. We used to have a very sort of flimsy box office reporting till about 2013, 2014. It's only when digital payments, the infrastructure really came in
Right.
that you now have a little bit more foolproof box office reporting happening. Right now, you can take those numbers with a reasonable degree of accuracy and say, okay, this is what's done well. In such a scenario, in such a complex environment, how do you calibrate as an entity, and how do you help producers calibrate as an entity where to invest in, right? Is there a certain suite of products that you've seen take off really in a big way in this new environment, or has it been more about creating new inputs themselves?
So from an OTT perspective, it's the irony is that while every platform has their own data to the last second, and all the analysis that they can do on it, which they don't share, as you rightly say, even if you've worked with them day in day out and you're willing to sign every possible non-disclosure agreement, they're just not willing to share it. But the irony is that they just don't have any data of any other platform.
Right.
So actually nobody has a category view beyond their own platform's view. So if it is, say, hypothetically Netflix, they may have all the understanding of who came to watch what, how many minutes did they watch, where did they leave, which episode was the weakest, what was the completion rate, watch hours, all of that. But they would not really know which shows have done well this year on Amazon. They would just not have. I mean,
Right.
there's zero information because they're not sharing. Amazon is not sharing either. So our effort in this, so our work in streaming, while it was going on since 2016, it really took off during the COVID years, 2020 and 21, where the category was growing, and we had, because we were in lockdowns and stuff, we could spend a lot of time building some products from ground up. And one of the things we are focused on is saying that we want to be the only ones, or initially at least the only ones who have a category view in terms of how many people, how many subscribers, what shows are getting watched, estimate viewership, because you don't need to. So there's a TV way where you have people meters at people's houses. Now that's
Right.
practically, various people have tried it, but it's a very long-term, expensive solution, and no SVOD platform has any incentive to
Right.
really get into that, because if they're not using advertising, why do they need that data to be in the public domain? What we're doing is we're using primary research to collect a lot of data in terms of both sides. One is viewership of individual properties, as well as number of subscribers, where is the subscriber growth coming from. For example, when we published a report this year, one of the interesting things that's coming out is that the metros are now saturated. So there is the next level of growth for paid platforms can come only from the non-metros or outside the top 10 cities, because whoever in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore had to take the 3-4 subscriptions that they have to take has already done it, because there is really no change in the metro numbers from 2021 to 2022. So that kind of then changes the entire narrative around what kind of content do you have to make if you have to target the smaller towns rather than the big cities. So now this is a category view. Some platform may be strong in some markets, some may be strong in some others, but I think our focus has been to build a lot of data, and a lot of it we put out free as well, because the idea is to create awareness about the kind of numbers we have in this category, the kind of data we can share, And when we test content, then we can actually use that to build an argument on why you should be, positioning it in a certain way, and why certain markets or certain audience types become more important. I think we are in this category in a very different space compared to theatrical and TV, where we are actually trying to push new data in. There we are trying to predict data sets which are already then eventually publicly available, like TV ratings or box office. Yeah, so it's challenging because you can put out a list of top 20 shows of the year, and some platform could say, but this doesn't match my actual data, which could happen because eventually you're estimating. But most of the time, the feedback has been that we've got feedback to the extent saying, do you have like a mole in our office, because this is so uncannily similar to what our numbers are. So which is heartening to say that there is a method which is working. So, and we kind of now so far it's Hindi. Now we're getting replicating some of that for Tamil, Telugu to start with. In theatrical anyway, we are now focusing on multiple languages. So I think language expansion is again something which is keeping us occupied over the next couple of years. But we'll talk about that.
Love it.
Yeah.
What I really admire about getting an Ormax report, and I've seen this happen for web content, I've seen this happen for movies as well, is that you put out what is a normalized ranking, right? So, which means if a show in 2021 wants to be compared with a show that came out in 2017, I can still do it, right? There is a rating. Does that, I mean, that's a very powerful tool in that sense, right? To give you that kind of category view. This is the right time for us to give a pitch to people who are listening about the power of content analytics, right? You've seen it grow. There's so much that's still to be figured out from a content point of view, right? For people who have not yet been converted to this side of things, right? What would you say to bring them over?
I'll answer that differently by saying that in the 14 years we have been there, we have actually the process of converting people has been an interesting process in itself, because there is somehow a notion in the creative business in India, and I think it may be true in other countries as well, that you cannot quantify creativity. And I think it just comes from an oversimplistic understanding, or maybe lack of understanding of how numbers can help and how data can help. We have just been very patiently trying to, and most of the time the person you need to convert is the director or the showrunner or the executive producer, because the marketing person or the head of the business may buy into it, but if the person who's at the captain of the ship, so to speak, does not believe that this is of value, there is no point in spending money doing some testing or looking at analytics and not making any changes in the content or the strategy because of that. And I think our experience has been that most people who have worked with us for one project have generally after that stuck around. And we've seen like some of the biggest names convert from being absolute non-believers to now we need to do it kind of a thing. And I think one of the reasons for that is that our approach in how we probably write our reports and how we present them is from a creator's perspective. While it has all the numbers and stuff, so for example, we would never make script recommendation. We would never say put a scene like this.
Right.
So that's, we are not writers, so we respect that. We would highlight what consumers or audiences felt uncomfortable about, and therefore this is what you should consider fixing.
Sure.
The fix itself will not be suggested by us, because that then is a writer's job or a creative person's job. I think that sense of where to draw the line and not interfere, quote unquote, in the creative process is something that over time people have learned that it is not this versus that, which is initially the thing that if you get Ormax in, they would interfere in the creative process. Right. I think generally people have to go through that one project to understand that. Fortunately for us, it's a small industry, so the word of mouth really travels fast. It was not the case with the TV industry. So TV networks don't talk to each other, but film guys talk to each other all the time.
Right.
So once we got into films, it was easy. And I think streaming is closer to films in India somehow in terms of, because the same producers are making content for streaming. So it's been the same experience that generally the word has traveled well, and we have had people now off late in the last 2-3 years speaking on record in interviews and all. Like Karan Johar has mentioned multiple times that he's using testing with Ormax extensively, and those kind of things help because that leads to more people calling us and all. So it's been more a case of word of mouth. To answer your question in a very simplistic way, like the point is that data can only help. Eventually, it cannot be that you have more information on the table and you will take a poorer decision. So I think it's a very logical thing from that point of view. But I get that some people just want to. I mean, they're directors that
They don't want it.
that like on my dead body kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, but then you have to live with that, and that's also a part. I mean, you can't please everyone.
Sure.
And I think it's fine, and that's something we enjoy. Also, we enjoy the challenge that there are some people still left to convert. And
what I loved about being in a room when Ormax is presenting findings, and you're there with the business folks and the creative folks, is there are two types of reactions that you get, right? Again, the kind of findings that we've seen in an Ormax report are which characters did people like, what scenes had the most impact, what emotion did they feel, right? There are two types of reactions that you get from people. There are the folks who are well versed with data, who understand that data is a signal. You can interpret it, action it the way you like it, right? And then there are those that are a little insecure about seeing things in black and white. I think I'll put it like that. You always know when you're a creative individual or creative professional, you always know when you've hit something out of the park, when something's a little subpar, when something is doing well, not doing well. But when it's put in percentage terms, right? This scene had 78% likability versus this scene had 22% likability. It puts creative professionals on the back foot, and something that they're often not used to, right? But I think there's a power in that. There's a power in figuring out why something didn't work, as opposed to your opinion versus mine, right? And often people come for feedback saying, hey, we're doing a screening, can you give us some feedback? Here, there is unbiased feedback available to you that is normalized over a lot of people who've been asked. It's not like, hey, we asked 3 people and we've come and told you verbatims of those 3 people, right?
Absolutely.
There's a science to putting all of this together. And I thoroughly enjoy those sessions, right? And I'm sure we're only just scratching the surface of the power of this over a long enough timeline. That's my sense.
Right.
I also enjoy, I mean, just to put it out there, I also enjoy alternative methodologies that have been put in place. I know Parrot Analytics does some amazing work, but that's more on the demand side. To me, at least, it's less on the creative input sort of side, but maybe I'm not completely exposed to
I
their
would say that
as well.
Yeah.
So I see that given the amount of money that is being poured into this, I mean, Netflix has spent 3,000 crores in the last 5 years in India, right? All put together, we're looking at an industry that's in excess of 12,000 crores being spent in the next 4 to 6 years. That's a lot of money. And it surprises me that there are still people who resist data input in there. But to round off this section, call Shailesh. Give him the day, get Ormax in the room. It's helped TVF. I can speak from a TVF point of view and from a Wavemaker point of view. It's helped us make better decisions. It's rationalized some of the bad decisions that have been made as well sometimes, and that's very powerful.
So one of the things I would just to complete that thought, I would say is that very early in our life, in I would say 2011 or so, when we were like more than a decade ago actually, we stopped worrying about this specific aspect that you mentioned of that some people could be insecure, because we realized that is the only way you could put facts out without, because otherwise subconsciously you try to either tone down the language or maybe present it in a way which is not true to the facts. And I think what really helped us was because we worked on that when we were starting film testing, we very early in our journey on film testing, we got to work with Shah Rukh on Ravan, which was Ra.1, which when we tested, it didn't test that well, and that film eventually went on to do below par business because it opened well but didn't sustain. And we presented to him 3 in the night for 3 hours at his home, and how receptively he understood all the feedback. And you were like, if uh, somebody who spent probably 3 years of his life and a lot of money in producing a film can be receptive, then it's something that you have to stop worrying about in terms of every meeting. Because earlier our thinking was that who is the person? Is this person data oriented? Is this person like personality type and all that? I think for the last several years we have just one thing, that we have to say it as it is. We can be the carriers of bad news, and that is okay. Because that's the only truth that we have to bring to the table, good news or bad news, whatever it is. I think it's very liberating. This is a thought which consciously, when people join a company, we have to, especially those who have worked in client servicing kind of roles before, or business roles before, we have to we make an effort to help them unlearn this. Because you don't want to be in a relationship with a business partner where you have to worry about how to make something palatable to them, because that goes against the idea of speaking about facts,
Right.
per se. So I think it's something that we enjoy. When we enjoy meetings when somebody is maybe insecure and trying to argue it out, because it's a process, and we like to engage even with people like that. And I think those are some of the more interesting meetings we have had as well. So
Love it.
yeah.
Love it. I love the effort to keeping it real. I like it. With that note, I'll do a quick break and we'll be back after these messages to continue our chat. Don't go anywhere. This is Storytellers and Storysellers. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. We have a special announcement introducing Club Paisa Vaisa, where you get episodes of Paisa Vaisa 3 days before release, bonus and ad-free content, and access to the full show archive. So get your yearly membership today for only Rs. 6.99. Log on to club.ivmpodcasts.com/paisavaisa. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus Masoom and Antariksh discuss how teenage girls in Pakistan eloped to meet the South Korean band BTS, and Insta stories that landed Namita Thapar in a tight spot. On Anish Thing, Anish talks to Anupam Gupta, CA and host of Paisa Vaisa, about what should be the financial goals for an individual in their 30s. On page 10, Alt News digital interrogator Kaleem joins Abbas, Meghnad and Nikhil to discuss the insurrection in Brazil, the sinking town of Joshimath, and more. New episodes out on All About Now feed every Monday. And on Smarter with Sid, Siddharth explains how one should practically and wisely use the term USP. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcasts.com. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our show, spread the word, tell your friends, and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Capgemini and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
And we're back. This is Storytellers and Storysellers. We're talking to Shailesh Kapoor about Ormax Media. We also have a very special guest in the house.
Hello.
We have Ashdeen Doctor sitting in. I feel very watched by Ashdeen's beard. Ashdeen's been telling us about how he's been biohacking the beard, and it looks lovely and luscious. I'm sure you've seen it. Do check out The Habit Coach.
Thank you.
Back to Shailesh. Shailesh, I want to ask you this. I think it's a burning question that has been on everyone's mind. Anybody who's जो इंडिया में सिनेमा देख के बड़ा हुआ है, उसके दिमाग में ये सवाल है कि ये इंडियन सिनेमा इतना बुरा क्यों है? Not to be flippant about it, but
No, of course.
there is a crisis underway. It's been around for a few years, but now I think it's become more pronounced because some of the films that are being made in the south of India are really shooting through the barrier, right? We've seen spectacular failures over the past 3-4 years. I think you were being very generous when you said success rate is 25%. I think Bollywood success, I hate calling it Bollywood, but the Hindi film industry success rate is at this point 2 or 3%.
Yeah, last year was very poor. It was definitely single digit. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Why is this so? And what does your very strategic vantage point, which is an unbiased observer who's looking at multiple films through the year, telling you about this?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to say on that, but just some of the main points would be, so one of the things is that this distinction between different film industries in India, which has existed over the years because they were insular in nature, and because there was no digital and there was no satellite also till a certain point of time, there were no dubbed versions available, and you would pretty much watch stuff in your language, and therefore the industries also became different, and they also operate differently in terms of bodies, structures, rules, and all of that stuff. Now in the last few years, especially in the last 3-4 years with streaming coming in during the pandemic, the language barrier has virtually gone away. I mean, it's gone away to the extent that it's not even a barrier. It's like any other thing. So when people watch KGF or an RRR in Hindi dubbed, they are not worrying about lip sync and all. They've watched so much content on OTT in other languages that they are seeing it as content. So once that happens, at some point of time in the near future, I think we would have to start looking at it as one industry, as the Indian film industry. Because if in 2020-21, there were so many articles I read in media trade and stuff, which was essentially questioning whether anybody will go to theaters now that OTT is there. We just closed our analysis of 2022. It is the second biggest year ever in terms of all India box office.
Right.
So, and only the second year after 2019 to cross a gross of 10,000 crore. The Hindi share has gone down from 2019, which is a pre-pandemic year, from 44% to 33%.
Right.
And out of the 33% also, one third is from dubbed South movies in Hindi. So
Right.
pure Hindi is just around 21%.
Oh wow.
So from 44, which was almost all pure Hindi, because there were hardly any dubbed films in 2019 except for a couple of them that did well. So you're actually talking of the overall industry being almost the same as 2019, but Hindi being half of it if you remove the dubbed versions, and Telugu being almost double of what it was in 2019. So I think it's just a shift in within the Indian film industry. We have, in the last 2 years, before I address the Hindi cinema specific question, in the last 2 years, we've been very aware of the fact that, this categorization of Hindi versus regional is something which is a very North Indian or a Bombay
Right.
categorization.
Right.
And we have to stop thinking like that. If we want to be in the Indian media and entertainment space, we cannot think Hindi versus others. So one of the things we did around 8 months ago is that we stopped using the word regional. So you will not see it on our website or in any of our reports. So that word just doesn't. It's like a word which we have stopped using, because the moment you use that word, you give it second status,
Absolutely.
and you kind of create a feeling that, oh, this is also there as one region of the country. But that's not true, because the biggest Malayalam film of 2022 is KGF in Malayalam,
Right.
which is a Kannada film in Malayalam. So all kind of crossovers are happening. The crossover which is not happening is Hindi films being watched in South,
Right.
which is, if that was happening, it would have been actually fine. If you think of it, there's a sizable audience there, and if Hindi audiences are watching South films, if South audiences would also watch Hindi films, it would be all nicely evened out. I think somewhere over the last 15-20 years, Hindi cinema has been driven by a certain urban cosmopolitan thought process. Filmmakers also probably carry that with them as their life experiences. Also, because multiplexes came up first in the Hindi market, and South markets are still very single screen driven, there's been a tendency to make more and more films appealing to a certain type of audience in Bombay, Delhi, maybe at best Pune, Ahmedabad. And over time, with OTT coming in, this kind of content is not what is unifying the audiences.
Right.
So there's a general feeling that when you see some of the bigger South films, there's more conviction there, and there seems to be more intent to tell Indian stories and stories which are more rooted, versus stories here which tend to be more about topics which are inherently Western in nature.
Sure.
Now, for a long time, I think was still fine, because the stars would still drive that, and would take it to a certain level. I think one of the things which the last 2-3 years have done is that it's completely broken down that system in Hindi, at least. In South, stars are much bigger.
Absolutely.
But today, when we see openings of some of the films of Akshay Kumar or Lal Singh Chadha, which is Amir Khan, and we see the kind of numbers that they do, in terms of their lifetime business, you clearly know that when people reject a trailer, they don't care about who the star is in this post-pandemic 2022 kind of a scenario. So they can be very brutal.
Right.
The other thing which has happened is that you can't buy marketing and just get people to come to theaters like earlier. That you put out hoardings and get people on reality shows, and people will come just because there's a lot of buzz created. It is far more organic now. It is more driven by unpaid media, social media. Uh, it is more. It has to be consumer pull than push. A lot of
Right.
Bollywood marketing over the years has been push marketing. You just shove a movie into people's face, and
And that formula has
yeah.
also lived its course in a way, right? You see it happen every
Yeah,
single time.
and today because of digital and social media and all the offshoots of it, audiences are far more aware and they understand what is being marketed and what is organically making sense.
Right.
So I think so all those crutches that were there of stars of marketing, because Bollywood spent 15-20 crores on marketing a film versus like a top Telugu film will spend probably 3 crore.
Right.
So all those things have gone away. Now it really comes down to, is the content speaking something new? Is it relevant? Or if you're creating a world or a franchise like a Bahubali or a KGF, which is so compelling that you want to come back to it every time. So I think this, it's still a phase is what I believe, because eventually, it's not like people who are making films in Hindi cinema don't understand all of this, and some of this work happens with us as well. So we know that these conversations are going on.
Right.
But most of the stuff that have come out last year was commissioned pre-pandemic.
Right.
So I think we will in 2023 and 2024 start seeing new stuff coming out, which where the thinking of 2021 will reflect, and that is where one would sense, hopefully, some sense of comeback for Hindi cinema, where it may not go back to 44%. I think those days may be gone.
Right.
But it probably back to the 30s and somewhere closer to what it was pre-pandemic.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the Hindi film industry to track back. I think there is certainly light at the end of the tunnel. I think there's definitely conversations happening and learnings being taken in as well, right? Obviously, the endeavor of making entertainment is not, you can't make it tomorrow, right? It takes time,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's a way back. But it's interesting that the pandemic has really shown the mirror in a way to the Hindi film industry and say, hey, stop doing this formulaic stuff. Stop taking your audience for granted. Even the best of films, for example, that do recover box office money often are underwhelming. Lal Singh Chadda, on the other hand, I thought was a really sweet film. It's just reasons unknown that it didn't see the opening that it wanted, and now there's a sort of wave of rediscovering Lal Singh Chadda on Netflix. I think it's on
Netflix it is, yeah. But I have to say, 2021 was the first year in our that time 13-year history where we had people coming to us and saying, can you tell us what is happening, because we seem to have lost track of what is going on in the audience's mind. Because generally, people's approach is that, okay, we know most of it, maybe there's some 10% you can help us with.
Sure.
But I think post-pandemic there was actually a sense of people saying, okay, we're feeling a little lost, just talk to us.
Right.
And I think that's, in a way, it's nice for people to admit that. It's also a little humbling to see that people are looking for very open general direction kind of advice. But it's never happened before. It's with anybody virtually, because even those who are very open to data and analytics and wanting to learn and get external perspectives always come with the thing of, okay, these are the areas we need help in. I think this last couple of years has been a period where people are saying, like, okay, anything to everything is open for a rethink discussion. So I think it's truly that period where those who believe in reinventing could just get the upper hand over the next 2-3 years. Like YRF has started this Spy Universe.
Oh yeah.
The fact is that but they've created a logo for it and stuff. So it's a thing, right? So they're obviously thinking of these things.
Yeah.
Earlier, it's not like this was not possible to do 3-4 years ago, but suddenly people are realizing that you need to create worlds and universes and franchises, because internationally, if you see the top 150 box office grosses over the last 10 years in Hollywood, I think almost 47 or 48 of them are all franchises and universe films. So standalone single films virtually hold no chance today to do beyond a certain business, and that's a worldwide trend. And they will probably be fine on Netflix or on Prime Video, but from a theatrical perspective, you need that aura of a franchise and aura of characters who are already well known and familiar to you. So I think that all these ideas were probably earlier seen as Western. I think they are now slowly becoming a part of everybody's reality, including all the industries in India. I think people are realizing these things. It's just that unlike the South film industry, I think the challenge that Hindi film industry has, it has to still cater to different regions, right? So we have to cater to UP and Mumbai city, which are very different, and there is far more homogeneity in, say, Tamil Nadu.
Right.
Like, yeah, there is Chennai, but Chennai would not be different from the rest of Tamil Nadu because the cultural connect is still very common. Here, the language is different from one state to the other in north.
Living conditions are different. Aspirations are different. So many different.
Festivals are different. So you can't even create cultural movies which will connect through the entire Hindi speaking market. So it's not the same as any single language, single state language thing. But I think that's where the challenge is. But to be honest, if a KGF does well in Hindi, eventually more people are going to the theatre. So I think that distinction that it's a Kannada film versus a Hindi film, I think still it's probably a little 2019 kind of a distinction to make. I think at some stage one has to see it as long as films are working and they are Indian films. I mean, I can still understand many countries in the world have been taken over by Hollywood because that's the only thing that works. But over here, that's not happening.
I actually think that 2020, 2021, the year before last, I think the biggest film in the country was Spider-Man No Way Home. Biggest grosser, give or take.
Yeah, it because that was a year when virtually nothing released for 8-9 months. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we are benefiting from the Hollywood import and the South onslaught as well, where there's a large acceptance for stories that don't look like us on screen.
Absolutely.
Right? Although Ashdin would look right at home in KGF for that matter.
Or Lal Singh Chadda.
Or Lal Singh Chadda as well, yeah, bilkul. What I'm interested in knowing though, and while these phenomena do point towards the possibility of success of a pan-Indian film being high, do you really think it's something that's worth chasing, the phenomena of a pan-Indian film? In the way I want to sort of couch this question in a couple of things is, because of the success of a Bahubali and an RRR and a KGF, we're going to see a lot of forced crossover come through.
Yeah, right? It's already happened in 2022. So many films have released in Hindi and not done anything at all.
Right.
But then we have a Kantara, which Kantara, even in Kannada, it was not expected to do anywhere close to what it has done. And then in Hindi, it was not even a film which was meant to release in Hindi.
Right.
It released only because it was getting positive word of mouth. And it's one of the top 7-8 Hindi films of the year. So I think it's, also with Kantara kind of films, we have seen a staggered release. So if it does well in the home state, do you release it in Hindi maybe 2 or 3 weeks later?
Right.
And that is, I think, an interesting approach to take. That earlier people would worry about piracy and all, but I think now it's realizing that sometimes you need to see response to content before you spend that kind of effort and money to market it to a wider audience. And that may probably be, Kantara could probably be a template for other or kind of a case study for other people to see that you may not plan it on day one, but if something breaks through, then you have to keep your eyes and ears open as to what the opportunity there is, versus trying to position something as a pan-India film from the start.
And get like first 2 weekends, try and close it then.
Yeah, I mean, today films can die in one day. I mean, so it's not even, like it, even the days when you could somehow pull your way through till Monday are gone. So we've seen a lot of South films release in Hindi and not even cumulatively get like 10 lakhs business because nobody is interested in watching. So I think there's an element of herd mentality there, obviously, after KGF, RRR, Pushpa before that, to say that Pan India could be a market for every action film from South. But I think Hindi audiences also, like they are choosy about or selective about Hindi films, they have the same approach about dubbed films as well.
Love it. I mean, speaking of films that won't make it to Monday, any Kangana Ranaut film? I have so many questions about content, right? And you're definitely the right person to ask this, but I'll try and keep them short because I know we're nearing the end of this episode. What's happening today, especially with short form content, is that big budget films are also being watched on the phone. Cat videos are also being watched on the phone. Every brother sister ever type sketches are also there. Reels from this episode will also be there. Guys, watch those reels, share them. What is your thought on that evolution? Do you think we will see a fundamental shift in any of the traditional forms of entertainment because of short video? And I'll again qualify this question. When Lil Nas X came out with Old Town Road, the music video changed, right? When songs started being made for radio, they became 4 minutes. Do you see that kind of impact from short video being taken up into higher value content? Is that something that you're observing as well from your studies?
Yeah, yes and no. I think it depends on the context of the medium. Theatrical medium in India, and I think probably even in the Western markets, is primarily to begin with an outdoor medium. So you are going out.
Mhm.
It's an outing. So that experience of going out, whether you're with your friends or family, and spending 5-6 hours away from home, which includes probably some pre or post, like a meal or something, that experience is not replicable on a phone at home or wherever.
Absolutely.
So I think that context, a lot of times people are going to watch a movie because they have to go to watch a movie, and which movie then probably is a secondary decision. Similarly in India, so this part probably is common to the West. Linear television in India is defined by a very clear thing of it's one opportunity for the family to sit together and watch TV. So it's driven by the context of the family or the Indian family being together, not so much by what content is playing on TV. So they
Sure.
could watch news, they could watch IPL, they could watch a
Big
fiction,
Boss or whatever.
or a serial which the wife is interested in watching. But eventually they are watching it to spend some time together. I think what can translate or transfer, however, is the style of storytelling, style of editing. If you see a lot of KGF 2 editing is very short video inspired. I mean, there's cuts and that kind of stuff, which you can see that there is a pulse on the youth's taste.
Sure.
And you're saying that you could actually, in action scenes, cut like you would do in a TikTok video or a reel.
Right.
So I think it can translate into narrative structures and editing structures, but the stories, long form, you still need to tell a story which is of a different nature and may have more drama or emotion in it. So I think it's somehow, while your question is more from an evolution perspective, I think there's a lot of narrative which pitches one media against the other, which generally is oversimplistic, right? I mean, nothing is competing against each other. Everything is eventually, because a lot of time that you spend on Instagram may actually come from non-media activities, like sleeping, for example. And I've read Hastings said that famously. Yeah. So that's Netflix's biggest competitor. So you actually, it's not one versus the other. But yeah, I think the short video and the certain idea of low attention span content is something which one can see even in communication. Like a lot of films are using these kind of formats to market them rather than coming out with a trailer right at the start.
Right.
Even now, Hindi films, Pathan came out with a trailer after 2 songs.
Right.
So people are experimenting with marketing formats that are more youth-centric and contemporary.
Social friendly.
Yeah, social friendly. Yeah. So I think those kind of things will definitely be easier to move around media.
Love it. I think my last question to you before I let you go is, from your point of view, from what you've seen over the past 14 years and more, what if you were to crystallize all of that learning into 3 principles of good storytelling that leads to a profitable production enterprise, what would those be? 3 principles for good storytelling that turns profits.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think there's a content template as such, but I think one of the things which almost generally in most scenarios does work is when people are surprised by something they've not seen before. And I think it's a highly underrated thing. It has been a highly underrated thing, at least in the Hindi film industry for a while. It's that wow factor when you suddenly see something and say, where did this come from? which I think a lot of South stuff has managed to do that. And we see that odd film, 2-3 films come a year, which suddenly catch you completely unawares.
I'm going to call it the Andhadhun effect.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And you actually say, oh, we didn't even know this happened, or this kind of people existed, and suddenly now you're seeing a full-fledged film or a series on them. And I think that imagination, which earlier was seen as only Hollywood can do that. I mean, only they can come up with these bizarre, imaginative ideas which are so interesting that you can't even think of them, like an Inception, for example.
Sure.
But I think we are now seeing that happening a little bit in India, and I think that's something which is going to be more and more the direction in which future success stories would come from, because that's what the audiences are craving for. Because there's so much content that everything can start looking like everything else over a period of time, which is actually happening. I mean, there's only so many stories and there are only so many emotions and how you tell them. I think that's one. And second thing is just a sense of Indian rootedness. In the 90s, it was the era after liberalization. So there was that whole thing of brands and materialism and consumerism coming into India. I think the generation which is now the core audience has not seen the scarcity of pre-liberalization era. So they don't really value that those foreign locations or those, branded clothes and all. They are more looking at culture and roots. And that doesn't mean religion. That doesn't necessarily mean poverty or whatever. It just means like a connect with what our culture is and what India is. We've seen how Ponniyin Selvan has been a huge success in Tamil. And there could be other stories which could be from history, which could be from mythology, which could be from contemporary culture, which I think is a lot to discover. And I still think we've just skimmed the surface as far as Indian culture is concerned, in terms of what kind of stories can be pulled out of there in terms of films or series and other kind of shows. So there could be a lot happening on that front in the next few years, hopefully.
Love it. That's super insightful. It's just an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm going to ask you one last question before I let you go. Which Shah Rukh film are you most excited about this year?
Between the three,
Yeah.
I'm more excited about the Raju Irani film because it's a Raju Irani film. So,
Right.
But yeah, Pathan is next week, so the recency thing is there. Yeah, I think, it's just a phenomenal year he's going to have if he has all three coming as per schedule. Because he's not had a release for a while, and yet he is sustained. He's big enough to have sustained as one of the top 2-3 stars in the country all these years. I think there's so many people looking forward to it. Pathan is looking very big in terms of how it will open and all of that. So you could actually have him like back to levels that we have not seen Shah Rukh ever at. So yeah, but I was personally not very happy with Sanju. So but apart from that, I've been quite a Raju Rani fan. So I'm hoping that that one does the trick. Yeah.
Love it. I'm looking forward to Pathan. I'm really, really looking forward to Jawan. It looks so left of center, surprising, like you said.
Yeah.
Stuff that you haven't seen before. It looks really amazing. And of course, Raju Hirani, my Nagpur friend. Not really, but he's from Nagpur too. Awesome talking to you, Shailesh. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Storytellers and Storysellers. That's it. If you like this episode, rate it, send it to a friend who likes talking about movies, talking about the business of content, because that's what this show is all about, the business of entertainment. Thank you, Asdin Doctor, for joining us.
My pleasure.
It was wonderful to have your beard keep us warm in this room. Thank you to the good folks at IVM who put this show together. That's it. This is Vineet Kanabar saying goodbye.